In this chapter, we're going to learn about immersive reading, how to become part of the story, and we're going to use the story of Paul Revere to accomplish this. Does it make sense? The more senses we'd use when learning, the better we would learn, the better we would understand, and the easier it would be to recall. So if we use more of the senses when learning, we would stimulate more of our brain. So I'm going to teach you a lesson that's familiar to you about Paul Revere, and I'm going to use more of the senses to lock the data into your permanent memory. Paul Revere stood near Boston Harbor, and he could smell and taste the salt coming in off the water. He looked and saw the light in the tower. One light, they were coming by land. He mounted his horse, and he felt the saddle pressing against him. And he began to ride, and he heard the hooves on the cobblestone. He got to the woods, and as he rode in the woods, he heard the hooves on the soft ground. And in the woods, he smelled the pine. He saw the Minuteman house ahead, and he sounded the alarm. The regulars are coming, the regulars are coming. Take a moment and think. What did you see, smell, taste, hear, feel? What sensory stimulation did you experience? What emotions do you have, and how much of this will you remember? We can use this strategy to help turn information that's boring into interesting information. One of the things I often hear from people is that they find reading boring and they fall asleep or they can't stay focused. And I tell them, if you become more immersive in your reading, if you experience it more as an adventure than just words on a page, it makes all the difference. Imagine you're learning about malaria. Now, as a biologist, I found this interesting, but many people would find it boring. And here's how most people would learn it. They'd learn 3 words. The symptoms of malaria are fever, sweating, and nausea. And they'd try to memorize the words. Fever, sweating, nausea. Fever, sweating, nausea. And chances are they wouldn't remember it when they had to. I don't do that. I imagine I'm laying under a sheet with a high fever, drenched with sweat, and puking all over myself because I'm nauseous. Yes, it's gross, but that's why I remember it. Because I've made it an emotional experience. I imagined I actually have malaria and I'm suffering the symptoms. While everyone else is trying to remember 3 words, fever, sweating, nausea, I'm recalling the experience of being drenched in sweat from a high fever and covered in vomit. And it's because it's gross, because it's stinky and makes me cringe when I think about it, that I remember it. The more intense the emotions are that I associate with this, the better the memory. That's just how your brain is wired. Now, if you were to read about this in a textbook, it would just say fever, sweating, nausea. Or perhaps for Paul Revere, it would say Paul Revere warned the Minutemen that the British were coming. Boring, you could yawn, and that's why nobody finds that information very interesting. But the way I did it, I immersed all of your emotions, and you had all these experiences when you were doing it. So now your brain had a reason to learn it. So with Rich Schema in Learning, you can extract details from the author's schema with your own schema to put it in your own map. In our next chapter, we're going to learn more about how to apply schema to comprehension while reading at high speeds.